Welcome to episode 1 of From the Library. For a number of years I've had a website, a blog kind of thing, where I would share thoughts I've had throughout the day. I'd write things down, put them together in a meaningful manner, and then share them on the website. So I decided to convert that over to this podcast and see if that is of any interest to anybody. So, first topic I thought of for this episode is that of the state of the American evangelical world. American evangelicalism has put itself in kind of a strange place as of recently in terms of its political connections, political preferences, whatever you want to call it. They seem to have a real big preference for Donald Trump. When you compare him to other prospects, it's somewhat understandable, but to prefer him in terms of his lifestyle and his life choices and his moral stance on a lot of different things is a little bit strange for American evangelicalism, especially when you consider as well the disdain they seem to have for someone like Vladimir Putin. So Putin has been the president of Russia for a number of years now, but for even longer he's been part of the Russian Orthodox Church. He's personal friends with Patriarch Kirill, and I've heard from other people in the Orthodox Church that Putin regularly goes to services, regularly goes to confession, and as of late he's been visiting sacred sites. Most recently he visited the birthplace of St. John of Kronstadt, and the people that were overseeing that site shared that he spent at least 30 minutes in St. John's room, most likely praying. So on one hand you've got someone like Donald Trump, who is morally not the best example for a Christian, compared to Vladimir Putin, who is a faithful, devout member of the church and has been for many, many years. So it's an interesting contrast to see this preference. Obviously Putin can't be our president in the United States, but we shouldn't be opposing someone who is for the church, who is for Christianity, and who is leading his country the best way that he can, with direct influence from possibly the largest, most powerful Christian, one of the most powerful Christians on earth, Patriarch Kirill. So there are a total of 5 patriarchs, one of whom, the Patriarch of Rome, known as the Pope, has defected, has left Christendom when compared to the other patriarchates. So with Patriarch Kirill, Patriarch of Alexandria, of Jerusalem, of Antioch, and of Constantinople, these are all men, not any one of them being a solo power like the Pope is trying to be. All of them are a council of equals, and they are doing their best to lead the church. Patriarch Kirill leading possibly the largest patriarchate over Moscow, and then his influence over Vladimir Putin is considerable, and leading that many people is a big responsibility. And so we need to give some second thought to why are we so opposed to Russia. I would guess that a lot of it comes from this idea of not understanding the history of Russia. Russia became a Christian, or I should say Holy Russ became a Christian nation over 1,000 years ago, when missionaries Cyril and Methodius from Constantinople brought the gospel to that land. Holy Russ, made up of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, is really one people. We need to stop thinking in terms of political lines, state lines. We need to think in terms of the church. As Christians, we are one body, and we need to be careful about criticizing that which we don't necessarily understand or have all the details on. The other thought I had in regards to American evangelicalism is the mentality, the thought processes of their own history. So people tend to think in terms of the church in a backwards fashion. The reality is the incarnation took place. Jesus began his ministry. He began calling disciples to himself. These disciples sat under his teaching, were led by him, were taught by him, and his teaching and his communication of his message to them was perfect. These disciples, in turn, after Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension, became the apostles, who ended up writing the New Testament, majority of it by Paul. And this message that Jesus gave to them, they passed down to the first century church. This church then took that message under the leadership of the apostles and spread the gospel around the known world. And for the last 2,000 years, that message has been continued, passed down from generation to generation. The mistake that people make tends to be of, well, when I read the Bible, this is what this passage means to me, is kind of a typical way of looking at it. But instead, we should be saying, when I read this passage, what has the church always believed and taught in this regard? We need to make the standard what the church has always believed and taught, not what this passage means to me. We need to get away from the error that Paul pointed out, that of private interpretation. The use of titles in American evangelicalism is strange as well, where you have someone saying, I'm a Calvinist, I'm a Methodist, I'm a Baptist, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, I'm a Jehovah's Witness, I'm a Latter-day Saint. Multitude of names, titles. Practically speaking, this schism, this division, started in 1054 when Rome broke away from the other four patriarchates, with the Pope trying to assert his dominance over all of Christendom. He began, well, it was a slow process of the Pope becoming more and more convinced with each successive one that he was the sole representative of Christ on earth. The other patriarchates said, no, that's not the case. It's never been that way. We've never believed that. So 1054, Rome broke away. And then 500 years after that, the Protestant Reformation happened with Martin Luther, the troubled Roman Catholic monk who was seeing issues with the things that Rome was teaching, justifiably so. And he never meant to break away or leave. He was kicked out. And when that happened, what we now call Lutheranism began. And right about the same time, it was a priest in the Netherlands by the name of Menno Simons, took it even further and rejected the entire idea of sacraments in any meaningful sense, and started what we now know as the Mennonites. And it's about the same time, John Calvin, a lawyer from Switzerland, Switzerland, again was seeing issues, followed Martin Luther's example, and began teaching, preaching, and was again kicked out, like Luther was, from the Roman Catholic Church. And with that schism, with that break, came the creation of the Presbyterian Church. And then about 100 years later, the King of England didn't like the way the Pope was leading things, wasn't allowing him to do what he wanted to do. So he broke the entire nation away from Roman Catholic rule and started what we now know as Anglicanism, or in the U.S., Episcopalianism. And since that time, which was around 1660, 1650, somewhere in there, this splintering, this schism has amplified to the nth degree, to where there's literally tens of thousands of denominations, independent churches. There's been a horrible disintegration of unity, where minutia is being argued over, and it's all based on, well, this is what this passage means to me. It's unfortunate that this kind of break has happened, and none of these congregations, none of these denominations, none of these independent churches can appeal to the foundational statement of, well, this is what the church has always believed and practiced. Only the Orthodox Church can make that claim. That church has not changed since the time of the apostles. The foundational question we need to ask ourselves is what I believe and practice that which the church has always believed and practiced?